So we are up to chapter 6, Mishnah 8, which means that we have, after this shiur, we have 3 more until our incredible siyum. We're very much looking forward to finishing Masechet Abot together, after which means that's going to take us right up until the summer. The summer we'll have Rabbi Ibrahimov will do a summer series, Be'ezrat Hashem, and then we will continue with our 48 Ways series, Be'ezrat Hashem, starting after the summer is over, back in the fall, by leading us into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay, 2 other housekeeping announcements. The first announcement is that on Wednesday night we have a beautiful Lag BaOmer celebration over here, where we light the candles in the memory of all the nishamot of the great tzaddikim and tzidkaniyot, the great sages, and the big tzidkaniyot, the great mothers of Judaism, the prophetesses, etc., etc. Each one has a name, and there's candles they sell to raise money for charity for the Beit HaKnesset. If anyone has a loved one, a memory that they'd like to do, and they'd like to capture that name because that was their person's name, please make sure to get in early. We're going to have a pre-bid. You could do that, I think, online. And as well, we're going to start with whatever bid they do online. We're going to start the evening with, just to save time. There'll be music, there'll be explanations by the rabbis, explaining and talking a little bit about the different categories of candle lighting that we're going to be doing. If anyone would like to help sponsor the event, there's also sponsorships available for that evening. And as well, on Sunday, we have an incredible shuk on the day of the Celebrate Israel Day parade. So there'll be thousands and thousands of people walking down Fifth Avenue, and people will detour here. We'll have all sorts of Israeli food and face painting and making signs for the parade and sending letters to the soldiers, all different wonderful things, Israeli music, things that will be happening here in the Beit HaKnesset as well. I think last year we had something in the vicinity of 3,500 people that came through the building. So if anyone would like to sponsor also that great mitzvah, please see Jessica after Please see Jessica after the shiur. Okay, let us begin. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. I guess this was a Rashbi day. So Rashbi says, in the name of Rashbi, Hanoi, beauty, ve'akoach, and strength, ve'osher, and wealth, ve'akavod, and honor, ve'achochma, and wisdom, ve'zikna, and old age, ve'aseva, as well means kind of an even older age. Zikna means when someone becomes wise through old age, and seva means when someone is an elder of the Jewish people. Ve'abanim, and children, na'ele tzadikim, ve'na'ele olam. Those are beautiful, they're wonderful for tzaddikim, and they become also wonderful for the world. We'll go back and kind of try and ascertain what the Mishnah is teaching us with those things. But what does it mean that it's good for tzaddikim and it's good for the world?
A continuation for the next generation.
A continuation for the next generation is 100% in terms of banim, but na'eh means good for the tzaddikim, good for the world, is a concept I think that is embodied by our sponsorship as well for today's class, which is dedicated to Nishmat Sarina Tueg Bat Frida Leha Shalom, and for the Hilulah Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer by Rosalie and Sam Tueg. Hazaku Baruch. And look at how special it is that on the day that you did it for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we're quoting him in the Mishnah. So that's perfectly aligned. So what does it mean, na'el lahem, na'el tzadikim, na'el olam? You have a guy, he's a ruthless dictator. He's a megalomaniac, he's a violent man. Give that guy a lot of money, what happens? His violence, his power grows. It has more of an impact on the world. So money, power, strength, honor, given in the wrong hands, what does it produce? Produces terrible things. In the right hands, na'el tzadikim, it's good for tzadikim that they should have this. V'na'el olam, it's also good for the world. Shneimar, as it says, Ateret Tiferet Seva. It is a crown. Old age is a crown of Tiferet, of pride. B'derech tzedakah timatzeh. And where is it found? It's found, this crown of old age is found in a ways of tzedakah, of tzedek, of righteousness. Illustrating again that this crown of Tiferet Seva, that old age comes, it's considered a crown in the hands of someone who got it because of their just ways. Ve'omer, and the pasuk says, Tiferet bahurim kocham. When a young man wants to show off, what does he show off? He shows off his strength. Ve'hadar zekenim seva. But when someone who's old, who's wise, what are they proud of? They're proud of their old age. Always think of this when I think of all the efforts that we make as a society to reverse all of the effects of aging. The coloring, I'm not allowed to have a gray hair, I'm not allowed to have a wrinkle, I'm not allowed to put on weight, I have to freeze it and cut it and change it and dye it and and I have to do everything to ensure that no one should know that I'm growing old. I don't know why a person would be embarrassed of one of the most natural things in the world. It's not like your fault, it's not like because you didn't take care of yourself, it's aging. With age comes great wisdom and life experience. Judaism teaches that a person is supposed to be proud of that old age, proud of the lessons that they've learned, proud of the fact that they know more than that guy with big muscles or that woman with great skin who's clueless about the world. I mean, think about it. It's a remarkable thing. So in so many ways, Judaism fights the value system that the world puts out. Ve'omer, and it says, Ateret zekenim b'nei banim. What is the crown of the elders, of the grandparents? B'nei banim, grandchildren. The crown of the elders is their grandchildren. Utiferet banim avotam. And the beauty, the honor, the glory of banim, of children, avotam, is their forefathers. So again, we're seeing this idea where each pasuk is communicating that each one of these things is considered to be something which is virtuous, is beautiful, is wonderful. It's not something to be shunned. And not only that, and it belongs in the hands of the ones that are righteous. And we'll see exactly why the Mishnah feels a need to tell that to us when we go back and look at the Mishnah again. Ve'omer, and the pasuk says, V'chafera halevana ubosha chama, and the moon, chafera, comes from lashon chafira, it digs. It's digging to hide itself. Ubosha chama, and the sun will be ashamed. Ki malach Adonai tzevaot b'har Tzion b'Yerushalayim, because when God will come to rule in the time of Mashiach, the light of God will be so strong that both the moon and the sun will want to hide themselves out of shame for the paucity of their light as compared to the brilliance of God's. Ki malach Adonai tzevaot b'har Tzion b'Yerushalayim, for God has ruled on Mount Zion in the temple and in Jerusalem. V'neged zikenav, and in opposite his elders, kavod will be honor. So if you look in the Mishnah, we see again koach, we see osher, we see koach, we see noi, we see kavod, we see chokhmah. All of these ideas are brought down in the pasuk, in these various pasukim. Each one of them is proven from these pasukim. Finally, let's end the Mishnah in our first sweep. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya taught, Elu sheva midot, these 7 character traits, shemanu chachamim letzadikim, that the chachamim gave or counted as valuable for the righteous, kulam, all of them, nitkaimu, they were fulfilled, they came true, birebi ubibanav, in Rebbe and in his students. In his sons, excuse me. Who's Rebbe? Sorry? Excellent, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So it's interesting, we don't call him by his name here. You're giving him praise, one would think that you should actually say his name. So why do we use this terminology, Rebbe, our teacher. So anyone have a pen with you? I want you to do some underlining for me. You ready? Underline the word Rebbe. Underline the word Bibanav. In the bottom paragraph. Underline the word Midot. Have you guys got them all? Let me know when everyone's done it. Yeah, we good? Okay. So we have a couple of questions here. Question number 1 is, why are we calling him Rebbe? If you're giving him praise, call him by his name. Second question, are these the only tzaddikim in all of Jewish history that merited to have these qualities? Rebbe and his sons? There's 2,000 years of Jewish history that precede Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Up until that point, there was nobody? Yes? Question number 2. Question number 3. I want you to look at the list of 7. Can someone read them out to me in English? Go back to the list of second paragraph. Who's volunteering? Yes.
The second paragraph?
Second paragraph.
Beauty, strength, wealth, honor, wisdom, sageness, old age, and children are becoming the righteous and becoming to the world.
So the 7 qualities are beauty, strength, wealth, honor, wisdom, sageness, old age, and children. Let's just hold up that English word, qualities, to the Hebrew word, midot. Is midot translated as qualities? How do you translate midot, Tanaz? Character traits. Character traits. So, I mean, the problem should jump out at you. Wealth is a character trait. Children is a character trait. Children is a gleam in the eye. Children is a reality. Old age is a character trait. Like if I don't have the character trait of old age, I don't age. What are we being told here? So sometimes when you're learning a Mishnah, and this is why when we learn the Mishnah together, the first thing that we do is we sweep through the whole Mishnah and then we start again. Because a lot of times, if you're trying to learn as you go, bit by bit, you actually don't have the instructive words of the end of the Mishnah as guideposts for how to learn the beginning. So let's take it apart now. Hanoi, beauty. Is it important? What do we think? Is it important for a righteous person to be beautiful? Inside. I kind of feel like then you don't need to say that, because by virtue of the fact that he's righteous, he has inner beauty. So it sounds like we're referring to something that's external. Is it important? Is it necessary that a tzaddik should be wealthy? I mean, I know many tzaddikim that have nary a dime to rub together.
Maybe it's not financial.
So again, you guys are thinking the right way. The problem is if you plug it in the Mishnah, it doesn't work. Because if we're talking about spiritual wealth, you don't have to tell me that spiritual wealth is becoming of or is good for a tzaddik. Because the fact that he's a tzaddik means that he has that wealth. It's almost saying that these things stood to one side are good for a chacham tzaddik stood to another side. So those are things that a tzaddik doesn't necessarily have to have, but they are good for him to have. They are good for her to have. Is it necessary? Is it good for a tzaddik to have a six-pack? Is that important? So in Hebrew, that would not be noi. In Hebrew, that would be ne'imut, pleasantness. Which, by the way, the other Mishnayot do say. So our first gut reaction, and you see it playing out in the comments that we're getting here, is that, the Mishnah cannot mean a beautifully symmetrical face with amazing skin, abs, a nice proportion of upper body to waist size. No, right? We're naturally rejecting that. We're trying to wiggle out of that by coming up with other interpretations of that word. And yet, it seems clear because it then goes to wealth. Now, wisdom, great. Sageness, awesome. I get it, yeah? What else is happening here? So I think that I want to first try and deal with the Mishnah on a simple and straightforward level. And the answer is, if you look at the words of the Mishnah says, not it is necessary, but it is na'eh. It is pleasant, it is befitting. It is good that a Talmid Chacham should have. Now, before you think that I'm crazy for even saying that, I want to quote you the words of Rambam. I'll come back to you 1 second. In two different places. One, when it comes to a Navi, a prophet. And one, when it comes to a Kohen Gadol. In both places, Rambam lists things that you never would have thought should be part of the prerequisites of being a Navi. One of them is that they should be handsome and strong. Why do they need to be strong? Let him sit weak in his chair and issue halachic rulings. Let him tell you what God said, hunched over, why? And one of the answers is that it's not important for the Chacham or for the Tzaddik himself, but it is important for others. For a world that is obsessed with beauty, if you have a Talmid Chacham who has a giant nose, half the size of his face, that might be off-putting to people who are admittedly shallow, simple, drawn by the things that the world tells them is important. But, like they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? For first impression people, it is good for a Talmid Chacham to be presentable, to be handsome, to be, put together, to have nice clothing. The Kohen Gadol walks around with blinged out clothes. Why? Does God need gold and jewelry? He doesn't. But the people need the Kohen Gadol to look that way, so that in the first place, we can have the Yetzer Hara have something, so that the Yetzer HaTov gets a chance to come to the party. When you have class and lunch, why don't we say, this is ridiculous, there should be no advantages to coming to learn Torah. It should be completely for the sake of heaven. It should be, and then we'd have less people. But what happens is, you come for the lunch, you stayed for the class, then what happens the next time? Can you imagine next week was a fast day? And we had this class on a fast day and there was no lunch. Would any of you say, I'm not coming, there's no lunch today? Would anyone say it? If it was the first week, you might have said it. Because you didn't have a chance to hear the class yet. So one of the things that the Mishnah is saying is, na'eh, it's good for a Talmid Chacham to have it. Because of the shallowness that is a reality of the fabric of our world. So we're going to deal with these elements on a one-by-one basis. And then we'll come back and we'll add layers as we go. Let me take your question.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, that Hashem loves beauty. First of all, he describes David HaMelech as being beautiful and in form and everything. He describes Kohanim, as you said, with that. He also says that Kohanim with mum, with a defect, can't bring karbanos. He's describing all this beautiful thing. He's describing the Beis HaMikdash, or how to build it exactly as beautiful. So he likes beauty, and it's for us.
So the point you're making is very interesting, and I actually spoke about this. I gave an entire hour class just on this point. How could God deny Kohanim with a disability the chance to serve in His temple? How could God do that? And one of the answers is the answer we just said. It's not God that rejects disabilities. You're saying that God extols the nature, the virtue of beauty, but I can prove otherwise. Because in all of human history, there's been one person who was chosen by God. And who is that? Moshe. And Moshe had a disability. So God says, if it was up to me, I would choose the broken. If it was up to me, I would choose the less physical, the more spiritual. But if you have that, you won't accept it. So how does God get away with having a Moshe? You know what the answer is? Because no one needs to listen to a word Moshe says until they're already bought in. Because Moshe doesn't stand on Mount Sinai before he does 10 miracles in Egypt, before he splits the sea, before he brings the manna, before he changes the water to sweet water. He does it after. At that stage, Moshe could be or look like whatever he wants. He's in. What we're worried about with a Talmid Chacham, a tzaddik, is that if he needs to influence people, there's always those people who he's going to have a first interaction with. I always tell people, as a rabbi, I never dressed with the attention I place on my dress today before I was a rabbi. Because I think my suits are holy. And my ties are holy. And my shirt with no stain is holy. It's important. You walk in and you look like a schlump. It doesn't matter what you have to say, because they're not listening. Someone once said to me, actually, Rabbi, I would like to sponsor. They sponsored my wardrobe. He bought me, gift cards for suit supply. He said, I know how important it is, especially when I first moved to the city. I know how important it is that you look the part, because otherwise people, they won't give you a chance. They won't respect. Now afterwards, if there's someone you know already, you can come in a bathing suit, it doesn't matter. But there's people always that you are meeting, right? Their first impressions, they really make a difference. So therefore, Rambam writes, by a Kohen Gadol, by a Navi, he needs to have those character traits. So the Mishnah over here is saying, remember, it's not crucial. Because we have a Gemara that tells us a story about Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma once went to one of the great noble women of Rome. He was known to be incredibly wise. And she said to him, how is so much beautiful wisdom in such an ugly vessel? And he said, you're absolutely right. Your father is the king. Your father is the most powerful man in the entire empire. He says, I'll bet he has an incredible collection of super expensive wines. She says, yes. He says, well, what does he store those super expensive wines in? She says, in earthenware vessels. He goes, how silly is that? That the king is storing his precious wine in ugly earthenware vessels. He should store it in vessels of silver and gold. She says, you're right. She switched all the wine to vessels of silver and gold. And of course, all the wine spoiled. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma explained to her that the external vessel, being pretty, sometimes ruins the internal wisdom. You could have someone who's so obsessed with first impressions, they forget about second impressions. And they become so shallow and so all about their face and their clothes. And by the way, this is absolutely true in the dating world as well. You have to make the effort. It's absolutely true in marriage as well. you have to make the effort. The Talmud does not tell a woman that she needs to dress up to go to a wedding. It doesn't say that she needs to look beautiful for when she goes to play bridge. But it does say that she needs to look beautiful. She should look beautiful to and for her husband, so that her husband should be interested only in her. I want you to understand this. However, someone who pays only attention to that, there's nothing left under the surface. So you caught their attention. What are you going to use to keep their attention? Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma says to this woman, who is obviously very beautiful, but at the same time so vain that she could ask a question like that to someone like him. He explained to her that your gold and silver external has managed to spoil everything that's inside. So Hanoi, Noi, beauty is na'eh, is good for a Talmid Chacham. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was famed for being very beautiful. Ve'hakoach, and strength. Does a tzaddik need to be strong physically? No, he does not. However, our rabbis showed incredible physical strength in the chasing of their spiritual dreams. Incredible physical strength. One time, one of my favorite stories about Hazon Ish is that they saw the Hazon Ish one day. They came into his room and they screamed. They saw him spread out motionless on the floor next to his bed. So they screamed, they calling Hatzalah, everyone's running in. Anyway, the rabbi picks up his head. He's like, what's going on? What's all the fuss? How come everyone's yelling? They're like, what do you mean? We saw you sprawled motionless on the floor next to your bed. We thought you died. The rabbi said, no. Every day, he says, I make a calculation when I'm studying Torah or doing mitzvot, exactly how much strength I have, and I keep as much strength as I need to get back to my bed. Tonight, I miscalculated. Could you imagine? Do you imagine using every ounce of your actual physical strength to the point that you've calculated? I'm going to use everything for Torah and mitzvot until there's literally 8 steps left in me. And one night he miscalculated and he only had strength for 7 steps. There are times in a person's life where they need to physically push themselves. You know, the other day, I'm a big Rangers fan. I'm a big sports fan. I played sports growing up. I love the game. I know the games. So one of the players on the Penguins, he checked out of the game. And when the analysts were talking about it, they said, I hope it's not for cramps. Just so you understand, an NHL goalie is standing there in heavy gear because they're shooting pucks at his face at 100 miles an hour. He's standing there in heavy gear. You have 18,000 people breathing the air in the arena. The sweat that a person, they need to constantly be drinking water. So Henry Lundqvist actually said that on the regular, in the game, playing the game as goalie, he would lose in the game up to 8 pounds of weight. Just from the physical draining of water from his system. Okay? The sheer effort to hold up the pads hour after hour during this game. So you obviously you cramp up. And you know the pain when you get a cramp and you can't let it go. You ever have one of those at night when you need to like physically jump out of your bed and like stand on your foot? So Lundqvist said, I hope it's not cramps. They said, what do you mean? Why? He goes, because how could you leave a championship game just because of cramps? You fight through it. How many times did I watch my father go to synagogue sick as a dog. Not where he was spreading it to others. Where he was weak. How many times did I see my father where he couldn't walk because of the sores on the bottom of his feet? Where he'd push himself limping to come to synagogue to be there. How many times? They're pushing through the pain. One of the things a tzaddik, it's great for a tzaddik to have, is physical endurance. To push yourself beyond what people think you possibly could do. Push yourself to the point. People ask, Rabbi, I don't know how you do it. Well, that's when it means enough. You don't check out of the game because you have cramps. If it's that important, you figure out how to fight through the pain and you're crying because it hurts, but you're still there. Part of what makes a tzaddik effective, a chacham effective, is when they have this endurance. They can fight through, where it's not, if you can physically be there, you're there. So I learned that from my father. I learned that from my rabbis. You're not well, you come anyway. You can't speak, so whisper. You can't stay the whole wedding, so come, smile as much as you can, and then go back to bed. Koach. Sorry?
No, I was just going to say something pertaining to this. Lubavitcher Rebbe used to stand 8 hours a day, giving dollars without any food, without any, in his 80s and 90s.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I always imagined that the Lubavitcher Rebbe had like pictures of his, the people, his role models, like in his bedroom. So he had like the rabbis that came before him. He had, all the different Lubavitcher Rebbes. But one of his role models was an ATM machine. He could stand there forever. Just boom, 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 24 hours a day. Drew inspiration from an ATM machine. What? You don't give up on a diamond. You don't give up on a Jew. How many people getting that dollar was one of their most precious spiritual experiences? Koach. If you can feel how important something is, then the effort and the pain and the difficulty pale in comparison to how good you feel about the fact that you're doing it. Ve'ha'osher, wealth. It is a wonderful thing for a tzaddik to have wealth. So my bank account is at Chase. You're all welcome to send me checks if you'd like. Why is it important for a Talmid Chacham, for a tzaddik to have wealth? So he doesn't need to kiss up to the rich people. In the Torah, it says that one of the attributes of a judge, lo tehedar pnei dal berivo, you don't favor the poor and don't favor the rich. Do that which is just. If a rabbi has enough money to take care of himself, how much freer is he to make the right decisions? Does he have to have it? No. Is it a good thing for him to have if he could? Yes. Doesn't need to rely on others. Other people don't need to dictate to him or tell him what to think, what to feel, what to hold, how to act, what to back. I'll never forget one of a very close friend and a donor of ours called me up to tell me about the fact that he was dating someone who was not Jewish. And he's like, I'm thinking maybe I could convince her to convert. What do you think? I knew that this conversation was going to be probably my last. So I said to him, you're not from this community, the Syrian community. You don't have the edict, which is not a relevant thing in their community. Someone converts, they're the real deal. They're the real deal. You're going to try and see if you can convince her to convert? That's the furthest thing from the real deal. Well, she's going to convert to marry a rich guy? If you can convince her. I said, look, I don't know if we'll ever have the same relationship again. I said, but I don't know if I could ever look myself in the eye ever again if I didn't tell you what the right thing to do is. You're an important person. You're an influential person. People will look at you and mimic what you've done. There is no way in the world this is the right thing to do. And I'm sorry, but I feel like I need to tell you the truth and not what you want to hear.
What happened?
He broke up with her. And he appreciated that actually someone told him the truth. But you know what? Not every conversation that you have like that goes that way. I've had other conversations that went different ways. I thought you were cool, Rabbi. That was a good one. I thought you were cool. I'll never forget that one. We played basketball together. The guy wanted me to marry him to his actually non-Jewish girlfriend. He wanted me to do the wedding. I said, I'm sorry. I think I'm busy that night. Doing what? Not marrying a Jewish person to a non-Jewish person. I thought you were cool, Rabbi. That's the guy who said it. I thought you were cool.
Did you change your mind?
No. Not all conversations go that way. I haven't spoken to that guy since. But when somebody owns you, it becomes much more difficult to say or to do the right thing. So osher is a good thing for a Talmid Chacham to have. I'd like to share one other thing. One of the only things rich people respect is rich people. So sometimes, if you have a Talmid Chacham that has that's made their own way, they might be the only person that's capable of getting through. And I want to give you an example. And the irony is that the person in the example features in this Mishnah. His name is Reb Shimon ben Menasya. Reb Shimon ben Menasya, he was Doresh, a very small word in the Torah. The word is et. He made a derasha, he expounded on, he learned from every et in the Torah. So as an example, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. What does that mean? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Huh? Honor your father and mother. Now, what would happen if I took the word et out? Kabed avicha ve'imecha. What would that mean? Same thing. So what does the et add? Must be a reason. Shimon HaAmsuni, or Shimon Menashe, I don't remember which one actually. It might be Shimon HaAmsuni. I think it was Shimon HaAmsuni. Then it's not this rabbi. But Shimon HaAmsuni, he said, every et in the Torah comes for a purpose. And what did he say about this? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Et means we're including somebody who is like this, but not quite. So who do we have to honor who's like our parents, but not quite our parents? Says the Gemara, no, the elder sibling. You have to honor your, because in a certain way, in many families, the elder sibling also helps bring up the younger children.
Thanks, Rabbi.
No worries. Anytime. I'll make it up to you in another Mishnah. You got that? So something similar, but not quite. They play the role sometimes of a parent, but not quite. Listen to this. So he's doresh every et in the Torah. Says the Gemara, ad sheba, until he came to the pasuk, et Hashem Elokecha tira. Hashem, your God, you should fear. And he stopped. Why did he stop? Sorry, 1 second. Why did he stop? Because what is comparable to God? Nothing. So he couldn't think of anything that compares to God. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, says the Gemara, until Rabbi Akiva came, and Rabbi Akiva told Rabbi Shimon HaAmsoni, he said, no, you know what it means? Et Hashem Elokecha tira. You have to fear God. What's like God but not quite God? What did you say earlier? When I asked the first one? The rabbis. Talmidei Chachamim. You have to fear, you have to revere, you have to give honor to Torah scholars. You have to take care of Torah scholars. Great. So Reb Shimon HaAmsoni, great, now we're back on. We're back on the et train. But the Chachamim ask, the commentators ask, 1 second. How come after figuring out all the ets in the whole Torah, he couldn't figure out this one? He needed Rabbi Akiva to tell him this one. And the Chachamim say something unbelievable. You know why Shimon HaAmsoni could not say that we have an obligation to take care of the Talmidei Chachamim? And why Rabbi Akiva could say that? Because Shimon HaAmsoni was poor. And he felt that if he told the people that an obligation to take care of Torah scholars, people would think that the reason why he was saying that was so that people would take care of him. He'd rather ditch all of the Torah he taught about etz. He'd rather move away, throw the whole tree, the whole theory in the garbage, than have people suspect his motives. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva at the end of his life was fabulously wealthy. He inherited his father-in-law, Ben Kalba Savua. Rabbi Akiva didn't need anyone to take care of him. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, take care of Talmidei Chachamim. And I'm not saying this because I need it, because I don't need it. So you see an example of a Torah lesson that could or could not be taught based on the fact that the person had personal wealth. Ve'akavod. When a Talmid Chacham has kavod, then people listen. When a Talmid Chacham has no kavod, nobody listens. A person's a beit knesset, the rabbi walks in, everybody stands up. That's the halakha. Rabbi walks in, you have to stand up. Should a rabbi tell people not to stand up for him? No. Why? Same thing like the beauty. When people approach you as a person who's worthy of respect, then they respect what you say. It reminds me of the 1,000,001 stories that we have. Only last week they found a bust of a head that dates back to Roman era. A priceless Roman sculpture. Where did they find it? In a garage sale. Priceless. Someone bought an actual Picasso in a thrift shop. Now, how could it sit on the wall at the fair, at the thrift shop, at a garage sale, and no one buys it? There's not a bidding war. How could it be? You know why? People only bid on things if they're on auction at Sotheby's. If it's at Sotheby's, ooh, this is important. Let me bid lots and lots of money on it. It's at the thrift shop. That means we only look for value in places where we think there is value. We do not imagine that there could be something valuable coming from a place that we don't already value. A thrift shop is for garbage. What does it have? Only garbage. But this looks beautiful. It's garbage. Yeah? If you have kavod for a Talmid Chacham, you have kavod for the words that he says. You don't have kavod for the Talmid Chacham, you have no kavod for the words he says. If you come to the rabbi asking the rabbi for help with your kids, but for years they saw you make jokes about the rabbi's speech, ask the rabbi when shul is over, ha 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 ha, yeah? If that's what they saw, you criticize the rabbi at the speech, the rabbi's decisions at the Shabbat table. Now your kid is at the cusp of walking away from Judaism. Now your kid brought home someone not Jewish. Now your kid needs to, to be spoken to because they have a drug problem. Now your kid is involved with issues with the law. And now you come to the rabbi, you're like, Rabbi, speak to my kid. The rabbi will have no effect on your child, zero. Because you've taught your child not to value the words that they say. So when it comes time for those words to be heard, what does the guy say to himself? This is trash. You did that. V'hakavod. A Talmid Chacham doesn't need it, but it's na'eh, it's good for him to have it. And it's good for the world if he has it. Chief Lord Rabbi Sachs was one of the most well-respected Jews. And you know what I realized? Eventually, it almost didn't matter what he said. Everyone was like, wow, brilliant. He happened to be brilliant. He happened to be brilliant, by the way. But what I'm saying now is that at this point, it doesn't even matter. So as an example, if he said, and he always did say, a line like this, it is not the profundity of kindness, it is the kindness in profundity which inspires a nation. Everyone's like, why? Because once you believe someone is wise, you search for the wisdom in their words. If you don't respect your parents and your parents are trying to guide you, you're not even listening. You think that they're outdated, so what do you say when they're talking? You're like, Ma, you don't know. Things are different now. It's not the same world. You didn't even listen. But when someone is wise in your mind, then you look for wisdom in their words. By the way, even if Lord, Chief Rabbi, Doctor, Lord, amazing, I don't even know how many titles the man had and deserved. He was an icon, he was incredible. If he wrote a book and there was a sentence in the book and it had a typo in it, and it was not what he meant to say, and two of the words were mixed up, we would assume that that's what he meant and figure out how to find meaning in it. Because you believe that there's wisdom there, so you'll find it. Even if he later comes out, he says, "Oh, that's not what I meant this." And you're like, "Oh, because I thought it was very deep what you were saying," right? You got me? Ve'achochma. What does it mean that tzaddikim, chochma is na'eh for them? That is what a tzaddik is. He is a wise person. Right? So what does it mean that it's na'eh? How could he be a tzaddik without being a chacham? I have two answers to this. Answer number one. Ronnie, someone here have my wife's number?
Yeah.
Okay, could you just message her to come pick me up from the synagogue? We're supposed to go to a Brit Milah. Okay? Thank you very much. My friends, there is such a thing as a tzaddik who's not such a chacham. If you knew any of the old school Jews from our community or from your communities, they didn't know a lot. They didn't have the pleasure, the privilege to be able to study in a Jewish school. But they were so honest to a fault. They were so devout in their prayers. If you told them something was the right thing to do, they did it, no question. They were tzaddikim without being chachamim. Now it's true, the Mishnah says, En am haaretz chasid. An am haaretz cannot be a chasid, but he could be a tzaddik. So the first layer of this is, it's good for a tzaddik, because you know what? That guy, every new thing he learns, he incorporates it. So it's good for a tzaddik to have more wisdom, because the more he learns, the more he becomes. But an alternate reading of this Mishnah would be that chokhmah over here does not refer to Torah. It refers to the wisdoms of the world. Rambam learned not only Torah, but he learned medicine, astrology, philosophy, and he incorporated all of those doctrines of wisdom into his Torah teaching. He saw them as being intrinsically connected. Is it necessary? No. Is it na'eh? Yes. Let's move on. Ve'azikna, old age. A young Torah scholar is amazing. But zikna and seva, the old age wisdom, is incomparable. In fact, we learned already in Mishnah that says, to what can a young Torah scholar be compared? To young grapes and young wine. And to what can an old Torah scholar be compared? To old wine. Just the process of aging and experiencing the world allows him to figure out how the Torah interfaces with real world problems. And sometimes you could have a younger scholar who's wiser and an older scholar who's good but not as wise, who gives better advice. Yeah? Finally, Ve'habanim. Finally says Pirke Abot, and children. Because ultimately, the most powerful thing that helps us see if a tzaddik is truly a tzaddik is how their kids turned out. If he manages to imprint on everyone in the community, but his own kids aren't the right way, then this is a man who's neglected his own family to take care of the community. And that's not the role model that we look to. First and foremost come your family, then your community, then your city, then your country, then the world. It operates in concentric circles. So the Mishnah says, Na'eh letzadikim, their children, if their children follow in their ways. It also means that the lessons and messages that they lived for, they don't disappear from the world when they move or shuffle off of this mortal coil. So my friends, we now go back to the end of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, these 7 things, they aren't things that happened, they happen to happen to you. What we're referring to is the midot, the character traits that are developed when one has those things. Do you understand me? So in other words, when we talk about wealth in a Talmid Chacham, we mean a certain fearlessness that a tzaddik or a leader can have based on the fact that he doesn't need anybody. He doesn't need anyone's approval. He doesn't need anyone's funding. So the midah that comes with his wealth is what we're talking about. When someone is noi, he's beautiful, we don't actually only mean his beauty, because beauty can twist and turn a person. But if the person uses it in its correct measure, which is the word of midah, he doesn't allow it to become a gold or silver vessel that ruins his internal, because he's so busy matching the right tie to the right suit that he forgets to prepare. That's why all of these things are midot, they are character traits. There are people who have a character trait of old age. You ever meet someone and say, wow, this guy, this young man, he has an old soul. There's a maturity about them, which is powerful, which is, educational. A person can choose to live their life with the dreams of youth. They can dream and pine for the good old days. And what they value is the parties and the freedom and the travel. Or they can value the gifts that older age has given them. Wisdom, relationships, family, understanding, peace of mind, acceptance of self. Those are the gifts that a person has as they grow old with themselves. Says the Mishnah, Kulam nitkaimu berebi ubebanav. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya said, I look at this man and I don't see Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi here. I see Rebbe as a teacher for all ages. A person who had wealth, but before he died, he raised his hands to the heaven and he said, I had all the wealth in the world, but I never even enjoyed a pinky's worth of my wealth for the wrong reasons. To have wealth, but not have wealth have you. To have beauty, but not have beauty dictate to you. To have wisdom, but not be obsessed with your own wisdom to the point where you can't learn from or bow to another. All of these, they are things that one can have as an external thing, or they can become a beautiful midah or character trait in the person's life. Thank you so much for listening. I have to run because we are going to be late for a Thank you. Both of us.
I just wanted to give you this. I was just at the Italian Cultural Institute. It's about the saving of the Jews during World War II, in case you're interested.
Thank you. I'll read it upstairs.
Yeah, I see.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.